What happens when the man who has everything meets the man who wants nothing? What happens when absolute power collides with absolute freedom? This isn't a riddle. It's a true story, one of the most famous encounters in all of history. The year is around 336 BCE. The place is Corinth, a bustling hub of Greek power and commerce. A new force has just taken control of the known world. A brilliant, ambitious, and terrifyingly effective 20-year-old named Alexander. His father, Philip II of Macedon, has just been assassinated, and Alexander is wasting no time consolidating his power. He has summoned the leaders of every Greek city-state to Corinth to swear their allegiance to him as the new hegemon, the supreme commander of their unified forces. And they all come. Generals, statesmen, oligarchs, the wealthiest and most powerful men in Greece, all travel to bow before their new master. All except one man, a philosopher named Diogenes, who was living in a makeshift shelter in the city, simply couldn't be bothered. Alexander, a man who demanded respect and was accustomed to getting it, was intrigued. Who was this beggar who dared to ignore the master of the world? Was it ignorance? Arrogance? Or something else entirely? Instead of sending soldiers to drag the man to him, Alexander, followed by his entire entourage of guards and nobles, decided to go to Diogenes. He found him in a public space called the Cranion, lying on the ground, doing nothing more than basking in the morning sun. Alexander, draped in the symbols of his immense power, stood over the ragged philosopher, casting a long shadow. He waited for a sign of deference, some flicker of fear or awe. He got nothing. Diogenes barely seemed to notice him. Breaking the silence, Alexander made a grand, magnanimous offer. "Ask of me anything you want," the king said. This was a blank check from the most powerful man alive. He was offering Diogenes a palace, riches, political influence, anything he could possibly dream of. Diogenes, who had been resting, shifted slightly, squinting up at the young conqueror and his magnificent court. He saw not a king, but an obstacle. His reply was simple, devastating, and utterly dismissive of all the power arrayed before him. He said, "Stand out of my light." A stunned silence fell over the king's followers, quickly followed by snickers and outright laughter at the sheer audacity of this filthy beggar. But Alexander wasn't laughing. He was thunderstruck. He had just offered this man the entire world, and the man had replied that he already possessed something Alexander was blocking and couldn't give him: the simple, free pleasure of the sun on his skin. As they walked away, Alexander turned to his men, who were still mocking Diogenes. He silenced them with a statement that would immortalize them both. "But truly, if I were not Alexander, I would be Diogenes." Who was Diogenes? So, how does a man reach a state of mind where he sees a king as nothing more than a shadow? To understand the man who insulted Alexander, we have to travel back to his origins, which were far from the poverty he would later embrace. Diogenes was born around 412 BCE in Sinope, a wealthy Greek colony on the coast of the Black Sea in modern-day Turkey. He wasn't born into poverty or obscurity. On the contrary, his family was prominent and well off. His father, Hysacius, was a banker, a powerful figure responsible for minting the city's official coins. Diogenes received a proper education, learning to read, write, and quote poetry, and he even trained in athletics and horsemanship, all hallmarks of a privileged upbringing. He was on a clear path to a comfortable, respected life within the city's elite. But that path was utterly destroyed by a major public scandal. The charge was defacing the currency. Ancient sources disagree on who was the culprit. Some say it was his father, Hystaspes, who tampered with the city's coinage. Others claim Diogenes himself committed the crime. Archaeological evidence from Sinope does show defaced coins from that period, some bearing his father's name, Hystaspes, giving weight to the story. Whether he was the criminal or just the son of one, the consequences were the same. Diogenes lost everything. He was stripped of his status, his citizenship, and his home. He was cast out of Sinope, a disgraced exile. For most people, this would have been a devastating end. But for Diogenes, this catastrophic loss became a strange and profound liberation. It was the moment his life as a philosopher truly began. After his exile, he made his way to Athens, the philosophical heart of the Greek world. It was here he began his new life, and where he supposedly met his own teacher, Antisthenes. Antisthenes had been a student of Socrates and was known for his own ascetic lifestyle. Legend says Antisthenes initially refused to take Diogenes on, even beating him with his staff to make him leave. But Diogenes was so persistent that Antisthenes eventually relented, worn down by his determination. The end of his long life is shrouded in competing stories, each a plausible capstone for the man he became. Some accounts claim he died in Corinth on the very same day as Alexander the Great in 323 BCE, a poetic but likely legendary detail. As for the cause, the stories are as wild as his life. One version claims he died from an infection after being bitten by a dog while trying to share an octopus with it. Another says he contracted colic after eating a raw octopus himself, in a final act of defying convention by refusing to cook his food. Perhaps the most philosophically fitting legend is that he simply decided his time was up and died by voluntarily holding his breath. His supposed last wishes were a final performance, a last joke aimed at society's absurd rituals. He asked that his body simply be thrown over the city wall for wild animals to feast upon. When his friends asked how he would defend himself, he supposedly asked only for a stick to chase the creatures away. When they pointed out he wouldn't be conscious, he replied, "What difference does it make what happens to my body after I'm gone?" Why was he so strange? Diogenes' strangeness wasn't a form of madness. It was a carefully crafted philosophical mission. The foundational story of this mission, though perhaps legendary, centers on a trip to the famed oracle at Delphi. After his exile, a destitute Diogenes supposedly asked the oracle for guidance on how to live his new life. The oracle's advice was cryptic: deface the currency. This was the very crime that had ruined him. But Diogenes had a flash of profound insight. He understood the oracle wasn't speaking literally. The Greek word for currency, nomisma, is phonetically very close to the word for custom or convention, nomos. He realized the oracle wasn't telling him to counterfeit metal coins. It was giving him a new purpose: to challenge and deface the fake values and hollow conventions of society itself. From that moment on, his philosophy became a public performance, and the streets of Athens were his grand stage. His most famous prop was his home, a large ceramic jar, a pithos, which was used for storing things like wine or grain. It is often mistranslated as a barrel, but barrels, as we know, them didn't exist in ancient Greece. He placed this jar in the Athenian agora, the bustling heart of the city, a place of commerce, politics, and social life. It was a powerful statement. While others strived for bigger houses and more luxury, all a human being truly needs is the most basic form of shelter. From his jar, he launched his daily assaults on what he saw as a deeply hypocritical and artificial society. One of his most iconic acts was wandering through the crowded marketplace in broad daylight, holding a lit lantern. When confused onlookers would ask what he was doing, he'd peer intently into their faces and say, "I am looking for a man." The implication was brutal. Here, in the great civilized city of Athens, a city that prided itself on its virtue and wisdom, he couldn't find a single person living an honest, authentic human life. He saved his sharpest and most theatrical wit for his philosophical rivals, particularly Plato. Plato, who famously called Diogenes Socrates gone mad, was a frequent target. When Plato offered his now famous definition of a human being as a featherless biped, Diogenes saw an opportunity. He plucked a chicken, burst into Plato's lecture hall, and held it up, announcing, "Behold, I have brought you Plato's man." The Academy was forced to amend its definition, adding with broad nails. On another occasion, he visited Plato's home, which was adorned with fine carpets. He deliberately walked in with muddy feet and trampled all over them, declaring, "I trample upon the pride of Plato." Plato calmly retorted, "With the pride of your own, Diogenes." His actions were often designed to be outrageous and shocking, to shatter people's complacency. He would eat in the marketplace, which was considered poor manners. He would urinate on people who insulted him, and even defecate in the theater, arguing that if a place was for the public, then all public actions were appropriate there. These weren't the actions of a madman, but of a performance artist with a point. Each shocking act was a practical demonstration designed to force people to question the arbitrary rules they followed without a single thought. What did Diogenes really believe? To understand Diogenes' bizarre behavior, we have to grasp the radical set of ideas that fueled him. The philosophy he championed and embodied was Cynicism, a school of thought that in many ways was an anti-philosophy. It wasn't about abstract theories written in books. It was a way of life, a public performance, and a rebellion against everything society considered normal. The name cynic itself likely derives from the Greek word kynikos, meaning dog-like. It was almost certainly an insult hurled at him for his shameless, street-dwelling lifestyle, but it was an insult he proudly embraced. When asked why he was called a dog, he replied, "I fawn on those who give me anything. I bark at those who give me nothing, and I bite the rogues." At the very heart of cynicism was one powerful, overarching idea: live in accordance with nature. Diogenes believed that humanity had created a world of artificial rules, laws, manners, desires, and anxieties that are the source of all our suffering. True happiness, or eudaimonia, could only be found by stripping all of that away and returning to a simple, rational life aligned with our natural state. To achieve this, the Cynics focused on 4 key practices. Lesson 1. Asceticism. Embrace hardship to build strength. This was not just self-denial, but a rigorous training of both mind and body to build resilience and indifference to hardship. Diogenes would sleep on the hard, cold ground, expose himself to the elements, and embrace poverty to prove that a person could be happy and virtuous under any circumstance. The goal was to master oneself so that fortune, good or bad, had no power over your inner peace. In a famous story, He owned only a simple wooden cup. But one day he saw a young boy drinking water from his cupped hands. Diogenes immediately threw his own cup away, exclaiming, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living." Lesson 2. Self-sufficiency. Need less, live freely. This was the ultimate goal, a state of absolute freedom. The less you need from the world, the less power the world has over you. This applied to possessions, relationships, and reputation. When his slave, Manes, ran away from him, friends suggested he go look for him. Diogenes just scoffed. If Manes can live without Diogenes, why not Diogenes without Manes? He believed that dependency on anything external, be it a person, an object, or an opinion, was a form of slavery. Lesson 3. Shamelessness. Break free from social shame. Diogenes believed that if an act wasn't inherently harmful or wrong in nature, there was no reason to be ashamed of doing it in public. This was the logic behind his most shocking public behaviors. He saw shame as an artificial social construct used to control people. By performing private acts in public, he was making a powerful philosophical statement. Society's rules of etiquette are arbitrary and should be ignored if they conflict with nature and reason. Lesson 4. Outspokenness. Speak the truth, no matter what. This was the sacred duty of the cynic, to speak the truth, bluntly and without fear, no matter who it offended. It was a form of philosophical therapy for a sick society. Diogenes used his biting wit as a surgical tool to cut through hypocrisy, especially when confronting the powerful. His insult to Alexander the Great is the ultimate example of parrhesia, but he applied it to everyone, believing it was his job to be the watchdog of humanity, hounding people about their foolishness. Why his ideas still matter in our world today. So why, more than 2 millennia after his death, are we still telling the stories of this strange man who lived in a jar? Perhaps it's because his radical philosophy is more relevant now than ever before. We live in a world of hyper-consumerism, endless social media pressures, and a constant, gnawing chase for more money, more followers, more validation. Diogenes' life is a powerful, bracing antidote to all of this. He holds his famous lantern up to our own time and asks the same question: are you truly living an authentic life? Or are you just a collection of brands, expectations, and anxieties? His rejection of convention didn't stop at personal habits. It extended to the very idea of the nation-state. In a world of fiercely independent and often warring Greek city-states, loyalty was local and absolute. But when people would ask Diogenes where he came from, trying to place him in a box, he would give a revolutionary, one-word answer: cosmopolites. I am a citizen of the world. This was a radical idea, possibly the first recorded use of the term cosmopolitan. He argued that our primary loyalty shouldn't be to the random city or nation we were born in, but to the universal community of all human beings. This wasn't a call for a world government, but a philosophical stance that our shared humanity is more fundamental than the artificial borders that divide us. His impact on the history of thought was immense. While Cynicism itself remained a fringe movement, its core ideas laid the essential groundwork for Stoicism, one of the most important and enduring philosophies to emerge from the ancient world. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, first came to Athens and studied under the Cynic philosopher Crates, who was himself a student of Diogenes. The Stoics adopted and adapted many of the Cynic's core tenets. the idea of living in accordance with nature, the pursuit of virtue as the only true good, and a rational indifference to external events. They essentially took the raw, shocking, and confrontational style of Diogenes and made it more systematic and palatable for a more conventional life. Stoicism, which would go on to influence everyone from the Roman slave Epictetus to the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, owes a profound and direct debt to the disruptive beggar in his jar. How you can apply his wisdom today. Diogenes' life was a deliberate extreme, a philosophical statement acted out to its logical conclusion. Most of us aren't going to live in a ceramic jar or renounce all our possessions. But the lessons from his experiment in living are clear, practical, and can be applied to our modern lives in powerful ways. First, embrace meaningful simplicity. Diogenes' life is a direct challenge to our entire materialist culture. He wasn't just poor. He chose poverty as a tool for freedom. In a world drowning in stuff, where we are constantly told that the next purchase will finally make us happy, he reminds us of the profound liberation that comes from wanting less. This could mean decluttering your home, or simply taking a moment before you buy something to ask, do I truly need this to live a virtuous and happy life? Second, focus on what you can control. The core of Cynic and later Stoic thought is distinguishing between what is up to us and what is not. Diogenes taught that we should pour our energy into cultivating our character, our reason, and our virtue, the inner fortress of the self. Fleeting pleasures, wealth, reputation, and the opinions of others are all outside of our direct control. By becoming indifferent to them, we rob them of their power to cause us distress. Third, question the norms society hands you. His fearless questioning of authority and convention is a vital lesson. Diogenes was a master of defacing the currency of social norms. He teaches us to think for ourselves and to have the courage to ask, why? Why do we chase status? Why do we fear the judgment of others? Why do we follow traditions that no longer make sense? He encourages us to live authentically, according to our own rational principles, not just by the script we've been given. And finally, build resilience through practice. Diogenes called his philosophy a shortcut to virtue, but it was a hard road that required constant training, ascesis. He deliberately exposed himself to discomfort to prove that happiness is possible even when external conditions are harsh. He proved that our inner strength is a fortress that misfortune cannot breach. We can practice this by stepping outside our comfort zones, whether it's taking a cold shower, fasting, or simply enduring a difficult situation without complaint, to remind ourselves of our own strength. One last question. Would you live like Diogenes? Diogenes' life was more than a collection of amusing and shocking anecdotes. It was a grand, lifelong experiment in the nature of human freedom. He systematically stripped away everything society told him was necessary for a good life: a home, possessions, a reputation, social standing, even basic manners, and he discovered something extraordinary. Not only could he survive, but he could flourish. He found a kind of contentment and unshakable peace that eluded the wealthiest and most powerful people around him. He showed the world that the greatest prison isn't one made of walls and iron bars. The greatest prison is the one we build for ourselves, constructed from our own endless desires, our anxieties about the future, and our crippling fear of what other people think. He demonstrated that true freedom isn't found in what we can acquire, but in what we are willing to let go of. The story of Diogenes leaves us with a deep, powerful, and perhaps unsettling question. He stood before the most powerful man in the world and declared that he needed nothing from him. In a world that relentlessly screams at you to want everything, what would happen if you decided you already have enough? If you found value in this story of defiance and radical freedom, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear its message, and leave a comment below with your thoughts on Diogenes. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more explorations into the minds that shaped our world. Your support is what allows us to continue bringing these powerful stories from history to light. Thank you, and see you in the next video.